a regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Welcome to another edition of Bearing Arms, Cam and Company. My name is Cam Edwards. Glad that you have joined us today. Election 2020 getting even wilder and woolier with the death of Ruth Bader Ginsburg on Friday. Now looks like we are going to have a Supreme Court confirmation battle amidst the election here. Don't know when a vote will take place. President Trump has indicated that perhaps as early as Wednesday, he will name his nominee to be the next Associate Justice of the Supreme Court. This is going to have far-reaching ramifications not only for the election and the outcome, as we'll get into with our guest, Amy Swear of the Heritage Foundation, but again, if you needed any other data points to tell you just how important the Supreme Court is for our right to keep and bear arms, this is it. I mean, we're now not talking just about what the next Biden administration might do in terms of banning semi-automatic firearms, in terms of banning large capacity magazines, imposing universal background checks, encouraging states to establish may-issue gun licensing programs. We're now talking again about the future of Second Amendment jurisprudence for decades to come. And given the fact that the court, apparently right now, as we've talked about in months past, takes 4 justices to agree to hear a case, takes 5 to win. We know that there are 4 justices who want to hear a Second Amendment case, but the problem seems to be that nobody knows where Chief Justice John Roberts is going to come down. And so neither side, neither the 4 justices that have said, hey, we need to take a Second Amendment case, nor the liberal wing of the court, who would say, all right, let's strike down some of these gun laws and let's restore some common sense gun safety standards to the Second Amendment. I don't think either side really wants to take that plunge because they don't know where Chief Justice Roberts is. Okay, well, that's not going to change even if we get a new Associate Justice on the Supreme Court. But I do think that it would likely tip the scales in favor of Second Amendment cases being heard and, knock on wood, being successfully challenged. Some of these gun control laws being successfully challenged at the nation's highest court. So here to talk about this, Amy Swear of the Heritage Foundation, one of the sharpest legal minds I know, getting into the nitty-gritty details of what is likely to happen here, including the response by Democrats that if the Trump administration proceeds with actually appointing somebody to the bench, that if Joe Biden wins in November and if Democrats take control of the Senate, they will pack the court, to ensure an anti-gun majority. Take a look and a listen. Amy, thanks so much for coming on the program. It's good talking with you today.
Yeah, thank you for having me. Good to be back on.
Yeah, well, listen, as if the 2020 election wasn't crazy enough, now we have now we have SCOTUS. And look, I mean, the Supreme Court should have been an important consideration, I think, for voters even before the passing of Ruth Bader Ginsburg on Friday. But now, clearly, this has been ramped up to 11. I mean, you've got Chuck Schumer talking about packing the court if Donald Trump goes through and Republicans are able to confirm a replacement for Ruth Bader Ginsburg. Have you, I guess, just an easy question, have you ever seen a confirmation battle that has the far-reaching consequences that this one will have?
No, certainly not in my lifetime. Arguably you could go back to the earlier days of American history, but certainly not in my lifetime. And I think part of that, especially now when you have, on both sides, but especially on the Democratic side, this sort of allegations already of impropriety with mail-in vote-in ballots. And, there's a very good chance there will be a lot of contested issues that come before the court with regard to the election, that having this seat filled, not just in terms of who that person is, but even just having that 9th vote, to avoid potential 4-4 splits on contentious issues coming out of the election. I think, this becomes even more important given what we've seen with all of this rhetoric about the election.
Absolutely. And of course, Democrats will say, well, that's why we shouldn't have a vote because we can't trust that the results will be impartial. A new appointee to the Supreme Court may just rubber stamp any opposition to the election results from the Trump campaign or the Trump administration. What's the counter argument to that? What is the argument as to why we need 9 justices now? We had Democrats make that argument a few years ago when Merrick Garland was nominated by Barack Obama, and Mitch McConnell said, no, we're not going to have a hearing this close to the election. Is this nothing more than, partisan politics at play, or are there some principles at work?
Well, certainly there are some pretty steadfast principles at work here. So I think first, let's go back and talk about what happened in 2016. So in 2016, you had essentially a lame duck president in his last year. So someone who, regardless of what happened in the election, there was going to be a new president. Obama was not running again. So the argument there was that never in the history of America had there been a scenario where you had a lame duck president and a Senate controlled by the opposite party, where the Senate confirmed a nominee in that last year. Now, fast forward to this year, and you have a different scenario. So you don't have a lame duck president. You have a president who is running for re-election. There is a chance of a new president, but also you could have the same president. And more importantly, you have a Senate controlled by the same party as the sitting president. And unlike with the opposite scenario in 2016, there is a long-standing history. It is not at all unusual in this scenario for the Senate to proceed with the confirmation process. So just from sort of a technical historical precedent issue, there's not this sort of changing of principles here to say that these are two separate instances with two very different sort of historical approaches to it. So I think that's very important and something that is being painted over with sort of a broad, unnuanced brush by many opponents of filling this seat.
Yeah, absolutely. And what do you make of comments by folks like Senator Chuck Schumer saying that if Republicans proceed here, if the Trump administration proceeds, that they will pack the court if Joe Biden wins in November and if Democrats take control of the Senate, that they'll simply expand the Supreme Court from 9 justices maybe to 13, and they'll guarantee that there is a progressive majority, an anti-gun majority, specifically for our audience, that'll sit on the court for not years but decades to come.
Yeah, so there are two important things here. I think from the standpoint of you want to talk about pure hypocrisy, there is at least an argument that Republicans who did not want to confirm the nominee in 2016 are not being inconsistent by saying, look, this is a different set of circumstances that don't apply to the rule we had in 2016. Whereas in 2016, you had a lot of Democrats saying across the board, it doesn't matter if there's an election, you must hold hearings, you must vote to confirm or to not confirm. You at least have to have the vote, that are now completely opposed to that, saying, no, we shouldn't have the vote at all. So I think the actual pure hypocrisy has come arguably from just one side here. But I think even on top of that, you talk about packing the court. So on the one hand, there isn't a constitutionally set number of justices. It has changed over time, but generally when you talk about packing the court for political reasons, for the sheer purpose of making sure that you have justices who will agree with you, that is a sort of thing that is unprecedented in American history. So FDR threatened to do this numerous times during the New Deal, but that was even, during that time, that was even too much for proponents of the New Deal to say this is unprecedented. This is a very bad precedent, because what's stopping, that the next time the other party gets in power from just adding the 6 or 7 more justices, and now all of a sudden we have 100 justices. So I think if you want to talk about hypocrisy in sort of an unprincipled, unprecedented stance, I really think when a push comes to shove, it is largely coming from one side of the political debate here.
Yeah, I suspect that, and I agree with you on that. And, and it's interesting, man, you point out that when Roosevelt talked about packing the court, Democrats in Congress actually were the ones who said, nah, we're not going to go along with this. Now you've got Joe Biden as recently as last year saying, no, we're not going to pack the court. But it's Democrats in Congress who are encouraging him to do so. To the best of my knowledge, I mean, Biden hasn't really had any press events over the weekend. I would suspect that in an ordinary circumstance, this would be something that Biden would be pressed on and quizzed about. But I mean, given the tongue bath that the media has given Biden, I don't know that they're even going to press him on whether or not his comments from 2019 are his beliefs today.
No, absolutely not. And I think that has been sort of an ongoing theme with regard to questioning of Joe Biden about some of his positions. But I think, again, to go back to this idea of packing the court, the basic underlying premise of doing that is that you have this theory of, well, look, we're going to get justices on there that are outcome oriented, that we know are going to give us the outcomes that we want. And I think even that in and of itself sort of shows the difference between the left and right now in terms of how they perceive the role of the judiciary. So when conservatives generally talk about, what makes a good judge, they don't necessarily get up there and say, well, we want a judge who is outcome oriented, who's going to give us the outcomes that we want, as much as we say we want a judge who has a principled framework, based on understanding their job is to say what the law is, what the Constitution is, and not what they wish it to be. And it's much more focused on the process than it is on the outcome. And I think what you're seeing from a lot of progressives now is the sense of which they understand judges as being, well, we need to pack the court with judges who are going to give us a particular outcome in particular cases. And I think that's a very, very important and foundational difference between sort of how the left and the right generally views what makes a good judge.
I think that you're right. Although, listen, I will say I think that there is some on the right who also are. I don't necessarily know that they're it's all about the outcomes. But for instance, look, we've seen criticism of Chief Justice John Roberts, particularly over the last 6 months or so when the court first declared that the New York City gun case had been mooted, and then when the court rejected all 10 cases having to do with the Second Amendment. There, the rumors were that Robert had gone squishy on the Second Amendment. Didn't hear anybody call for his impeachment or anything like that. But I think that there were, a lot of folks who were upset at maybe the Chief Justice, playing politics from the bench. And that has been, I think, one of the criticisms of Chief Justice Roberts going back to like the Obamacare decision. But when you look at, some of the names, I mean, it's interesting. I mean, President Trump just released his short list of nominees for the Supreme Court, right before Ruth Bader Ginsburg passed, challenged Joe Biden to do the same. Biden has not done so. But if you look at those, the list of judges, the list of nominees that the president has said, all right, this is the list I'm going to be choosing from. Gun owners, I think, have a lot to be, hopeful about. There are a number of justices or a number of judges, a number of judicial candidates on there who have a very, very strong record in terms of backing the Second Amendment. And I think that even holds true for one of the names that's emerged as the front runner to be Trump's pick for the Associate Justice on the Supreme Court, Judge Amy Coney Barrett. Yeah,
absolutely. And so again, I would argue that, even for some of those judges where they don't necessarily have a record on the Supreme or on the Second Amendment issues, judges like, for example, Barbara Lagoa, whose name has come up quite a bit. The important thing again is even if they don't have a record on the Second Amendment, these judges who are emerging as the front runners, what we do have is a record of them applying the Constitution faithfully, that they recognize their role is to understand the original meaning of that document and to protect the rights as intended, and not to aim for a certain outcome, which in the case of the Second Amendment, if you're applying the document as intended, would protect a lot of Second Amendment rights. But again, I think Amy Coney Barrett, as you suggested, very, very strong record across the board in faithfully applying the Constitution and being a committed textualist and originalist, but especially with Second Amendment issues, a very, very strong record with that.
Talking again with Amy Swear of the Heritage Foundation. And, obviously this is going to be important on so many issues. But really, when it comes to our right to keep and bear arms, this election, it really feels like this is for all the marbles. You've got members of Congress who had threatened to reorient the court. I think that was their language. If the Supreme Court didn't moot the New York City gun case, you've got a campaign in Joe Biden and Kamala Harris that want to ban the most commonly owned rifles, the most commonly sold magazines in the country, make it a federal felony offense to continue to own them if you don't register them with the government, and hand over hundreds of dollars for every banned item. The Second Amendment really is at stake here. And it seems to me that, this election, if nothing else, does come down to what is our Second Amendment going to look like 5 years, 10 years, 20 years from now? Is it even going to exist? Or could it be, declared a dead letter? I don't know if a Biden Supreme Court would overturn Hillary McDonald, but they could still do a lot of damage to limit what those decisions said, and then basically declare that, you might have a right to own a handgun in your home, but that's where the right stops.
Right, absolutely. And again, that's why it's so important that, when you're talking about what type of judge do you want in this role, you want a judge who is committed to faithfully protecting those Second Amendment rights in the way that it was intended, and not just sort of rubber stamping, whatever gun control issue comes before them just because they think guns personally are bad and should be prohibited, and so therefore the state should be able to regulate it however the heck they want. So you're right. This is very important. It's important for a lot of reasons, but specifically when you're talking about an issue that is at the national forefront, whether it's abortion, whether it is Second Amendment, whether it is, Fourth Amendment or due process or whatever it be, the type of judge who will faithfully apply the Constitution, regardless of their personal preferences, that type of judge is so important in this role, especially in a very politically divisive nation right now. You need a judge who doesn't care about the politics of it, but cares about faithfully applying the text of the Constitution, which, again, for all of the gun listeners out there, the gun owners who are interested in this, has such fundamental, it's of such fundamental importance for the Second Amendment, as much as any of the other amendments.
Absolutely. All right. So I'm going to ask you to play Nostradamus here. If you were a betting woman, what do you think the odds are that we get a new Supreme Court justice before Inauguration Day in 2021?
Yeah. So this is, if I were a betting person, I'd say there's probably a good chance that there is a vote taken before the election. I don't think it is, 100% certainty. I think the odds are pretty good. I think those odds increase if you have a judge who is nominated, who I think, just like basically any of the front runners at this point, who isn't committed textualist, who conservatives on the Senate are not going to have concerns about, and who, I think conservatives will really rally behind. I think those odds increase. So I'd say they're good. They're not perfect. But I think that would be sort of my final analysis, is the odds are pretty good.
All right. Amy Swear with the Heritage Foundation. It is always good catching up with you. Thank you so much for giving us your insight and analysis today, and look forward to doing this again very soon.
Thank you for having me.
And by the way, let me just elaborate on something. When I said that even if a Biden-Harris Supreme Court didn't overturn Hillary McDonald, that they could try to limit the right to keep your arms to the right to own a handgun in the home, this wouldn't be, now we got to define right, okay? In New York City, theoretically, you have the right to keep and bear arms, but it doesn't look like a right. It looks like a privilege. Because in order for you to keep a gun in your home, you have to apply to the New York Police Department. You have to get what's called a premises permit, which can take up to a year to receive. You have to hand over all kinds of information to the NYPD, including your tax returns. A traffic ticket, so much as a traffic ticket, could be enough reason to deny you your ability to own a firearm in your home. Now, that's what the right to keep and bear arms would look like nationwide. At best, that's what the right would look like nationwide under a Biden-Harris appointed Supreme Court. So again, the stakes are incredibly high right now. And unfortunately, Democrats seem intent on adding fuel to the fire by talking about and advocating for packing the Supreme Court, which would mean getting rid of the filibuster in the Senate. But they're already talking about doing that, too. No, and it's fascinating to me. We got people today. I saw some goober on MSNBC talking about, look, there's nothing in the law that says you can't appoint a Supreme Court justice right now, but there are norms that must be followed. And this just blows up all the norms. What about blowing up the filibuster? I mean, that's a norm. What about packing the Supreme Court? That would be violating these norms. It only seems to matter. Norms being destroyed only seem to matter when they can blame Republicans for doing it. If they're in charge, it's not destroying norms, it's progress, right? Yeah. All right. Let's get to today's armed citizen story, our good deed of the day, our recidivist report. We're going to start there with a case out of Kansas City where a 19-year-old, Daisy Martinez, was shot and killed September 16th during a Mexican Independence Day celebration on Southwest Boulevard in Kansas City. Now, the man arrested for this crime, Diego Calderon Guzman, a convicted felon who served time for a sex crime involving a minor, but was back out on the streets. And allegedly, the guy who pulled the trigger, he's been charged with second-degree murder, unlawful use of a weapon, 2 counts of armed criminal action, as well as unlawful possession of a weapon. Back in 2014, he pleaded guilty in Wyandotte County, Kansas, to aggravated indecent liberties with a 15-year-old girl. Yeah. It was last Wednesday when officers went to the area of 27th and Southwest Boulevard on a reported shooting. Witnesses and video surveillance revealed a black Silverado truck with a large Mexican flag on the center rear bumper involved in that shooting. Officers chased the suspected truck, took the defendant and the truck's owner into custody. They saw a rifle in the truck that the Kansas City Crime Lab later connected to shell casings found at the crime scene. The owner of the truck said that Calderon Guzman shot the victim. Calderon Guzman told police that he fired the weapon after gunfire broke out. He said he thought he was firing at people who were shooting at him, and he didn't see the victim running in front of him when he was shot. Yeah. The family of Daisy Martinez trying to raise money for her funeral expenses. They say that they are happy the charges have been filed against Martinez's alleged killer. One of the family members said, I can't even fully comprehend it. I don't think it's even fully sunk in yet that she's no longer here ever. So that's kind of a hard pill to swallow. Calderon Guzman does not yet have a court date listed. Prosecutors are asking for $500,000 bond in this case. Could be also facing federal charges if the U.S. attorney decides to pick up the felon in possession charge. But again, all of the folks out there are saying, well, what we need are these common sense gun control laws. We just need common sense gun safety laws. This guy was a felon. Wasn't supposed to be anywhere near a gun or a single round of ammunition. Yet he apparently admitted to police, I was the guy who pulled the trigger. I just didn't see the girl running in front of me. I thought I was just firing back at people. Yeah. So the next time you hear somebody like Joe Biden say, well, what we need, or Kamala Harris, what we need are these common sense gun safety laws, ask how those laws that are aimed at you and me and every other legal gun owner in this country, how they would do a damn thing to stop a guy like this one from illegally obtaining a firearm and pulling the trigger and ending the life of a 19-year-old girl. All right, on to our armed citizen story of the day. Houston, Texas, where the Houston police says a carjacker was shot after trying to carjack an SUV with a woman inside. This was off of the East X Freeway in Northeast Houston. Happened about 1:15 in the morning last Thursday. Investigators say a male suspect in a black Ford F-150 apparently involved in some kind of accident on the freeway, then pulled into this Valero gas station. At the same time, Houston PD says that a couple was at one of the gas pumps. A woman was inside a silver SUV. Man's outside pumping gas. That's when the driver of the Ford F-150 attempts to carjack the vehicle with a woman inside, hops into the driver's seat, tries to take off. That's when the man who was pumping gas pulled out his gun, fired several shots at the suspect, who then jumped back out of the car. Investigators say that he was shot. He ran around to the back of the gas station where he collapsed, taken to the hospital. Police say they're unaware of any injuries to the couple. Obviously, the gentleman who defended his wife, or his companion anyway, not facing any charges, acting in the defense of another. No word, by the way, on if that would-be carjacker actually survived that encounter. We'll see if we can find more information for you and bring that to you in a future Bearing Arms Cam and Company. Finally today, our good deed of the day from Hampton, Georgia, Henry County, where a police officer honored for saving 2 lives in just over a week. Mason Lewis, honored by the city council there in Hampton, Georgia, for his life-saving actions, which began on July 13th when he showed up at the scene of an automobile accident, discovered a female in a wrecked car with her arm severed below the elbow. That's when Officer Lewis immediately and successfully applied a tourniquet to the victim's arm, slowing the loss of blood, stabilizing her until emergency medical personnel arrived, directly preventing the loss of life, according to the proclamation by the city council. Hampton Police Chief stated that the wreck stemmed from a domestic dispute in an adjoining county. The victim's ex-husband ran her off the road and then attacked her with a machete, cutting off her arm. Yeah. He says that's not something we see every day, but Officer Lewis was Johnny on the spot. The EMTs were as well. Assailant arrested the next day. He's now currently in the Henry County Jail. There was also a call that Officer Lewis received on July 21st, dispatched to a scene where he encountered somebody unconscious as a result of an overdose. He was able to use Narcan to successfully bring the victim back to consciousness. Chief Austin there said, unfortunately, we've had to become trained and supply with Narcan because of the number of overdose cases we get. 4 or 5 years ago, we were not. And now, again, that is a pretty common occurrence. The 26-year-old Officer Mason Lewis with the force there in Hampton, Georgia for almost 2 years, previously serving as a deputy in Spalding County. And again, honored for his life-saving efforts in the right place at the right time, unable to do the right thing not once but twice in the span of a week there in Hampton, Georgia. That is all the time we've got for you on this edition of Bearing Arms Cam and Company. I want to thank you for being a part of the program today. Actually, we got a squidge more time here. I'm gonna carve out just a few extra seconds. As you know, I said we were not going to do a show last Friday. I had to go to the doctor with my wife to get the latest results for her CT scan dealing with her lung cancer. I just wasn't really sure what kind of mood I was going to be in. Yeah, well, I wasn't in a very good mood. We did not get good news on Friday. Unfortunately, her cancer is progressing. The chemotherapy is not working at the moment. So we are hopeful that we'll be able to start a new treatment here in the coming days if our insurance company doesn't decide to jack us around and play some games. If they do, don't worry. I'll actually be talking about that probably on the show as well, and certainly on my Twitter at Cam Edwards. But I do want to thank each and every one of you for your prayers and your kind words and your thoughts. We are still in the fight. She has not given up. She is still feeling pretty good. Still working 2 jobs, homeschooling, dealing with goats and pigs and chickens. So she's still getting around and kicking butt. And we're going to make sure that that is the case for as long as possible. But again, just wanted to give you an update and thank you again for all of the outreach that I received over the weekend. It was it really was needed and greatly appreciated. All right, now we're out of time for this edition of Bearing Arms Cam and Company. But the good news is we will be back tomorrow with more of the latest Second Amendment news and information from all across the nation. Don't forget, you can subscribe to Town Hall Media on YouTube. That way you never miss a program. You can also subscribe to Bearing Arms Cam and Company on Spotify, Stitcher, wherever you get your podcast. And be sure to spread the word as well. Let folks know that this is your one-stop shop. That's what I meant to say. For everything you need to know about what's going on with our right to keep and bear arms on a daily basis, make sure you check out Bearing Arms multiple times a day as well. And we'll be back tomorrow again with more of the latest segment of news and information right here on Bearing Arms Cam and Company.